hang on to your hats, guys. Buckle in. Now, if you start to feel a little bit bored in the very beginning, stick around because it's going to get juicy. What you are going to hear is a completely different interpretation from what you've heard before. Trust me, I don't think you've heard this explanation before, and it's a good one. This video is going to give you a clear understanding of the foundations of our world religions. So God's appearance was created to appear as if he was made of fire and brimstone. There have been many theories, views, and speculations about the events described in the book of Exodus, but more so about the mysterious encounter on the mount between Moses and the character he called God that he presented to the people. Now, up to this point in the story, the entire Moses narrative is bad. The conquest of Canaan was an event that significantly shaped the religions of the world, especially in the West, which is crumbling more and more these days. Now, what I've done, by the way, is the original text is in the German language, and I'm paraphrasing to make the translation as coherent as possible for the listener of this audiobook. Okay, anyone who knows anything about Mesopotamia will recognize that the founding story of Moses, the foundling story regarding his birth and his upbringing, there's a parallel with the story of Aki, the water creator. The same goes for the Bible's account of the birth of Moses. The same motif of the abandonment and then subsequent rescue of the child of fate, a king's child, a hero of his people, is a feature that occurs in all the mythologies of antiquity. Some of the best known examples are the childhood stories of Romulus and Remus, Oedipus, Sargon of Akkad, and Cyrus II. Flavius Josephus and the opinions of numerous historians represent that the Neo-Assyrian texts from around the 8th century BC, known as the Legend of Sargon of Akkad, as being the template for Exodus 1 through 10 of the Old Testament. The prime similarities are that in both cases the child is found in a waterproof box in the river and the rescuer adopts the baby. To quote the text, "My mother, a high priestess, became pregnant with me. Secretly, she gave birth to me. She put me in a reed box. She sealed my dwelling with bitumen. She exposed me to the river, which did not wash over me. Aki, the water bearer, pulled me out and raised me as his adopted child." The part of this story about fleeing with the baby to a foreign country for fear of the king or pharaoh, and then the subsequent auspicious returning to Egypt, also is seen in many legends of the Middle East. And so we find that the Abrahamic faith is based on borrowed stories and myths without authenticity. The elements of the Bible are cobbled together fragments from other myths and myth-like stories. Millions and millions of believers are still falling for this fallacy where they have learned nothing for 3,000 years and let themselves be influenced by liars and charlatans who tell us black, then white, and want to sell us an illusion. The events portrayed in the book of Exodus didn't happen the way the representatives of the Jewish faith want to explain. So let's talk about this supposed Moses and his previous life up to the Exodus, but more explicitly we will discuss the events at Mount Sinai, wherever you claim to see this mountain. Archaeologically and historically, there is no evidence of Moses as a person or an Exodus outside of the Bible. I would like to take a step backwards towards enlightenment here in regards to the supposed encounter with God, which is told to us in the book of Exodus, supposedly written by Moses himself. Humanity has been influenced by Judaism for over 2,500 years now. Have they been cheated? So for some religiously oriented believers, the Bible describes an encounter with God where Moses reveals a God who communicates with sound and smoke, and drums and trumpets at Mount Sinai. Why such a benevolent and loving God would have to make all that ruckus remains unclear. Why was it that only Moses was chosen to see God? In modern times, the phenomenon is interpreted as seeing Mount Sinai as a landing pad for spaceship with extraterrestrial life forms. But shouldn't Moses have actually been an eyewitness? If it had been a spaceship landing, he would have had the event certainly documented in much more detail. The amateur researchers, mostly without any academic education, especially Eric von Daniken and many of his followers who identify with the idea of ancient aliens, interpret the text as describing UFOs in the book of Ezekiel as proof that extraterrestrials visited Earth in their spacecraft. The ancient alien scene is booming, and many charlatans are out there making money with it. Another version is that a volcanic eruption must have occurred. However, Mount Sinai, as we know it, geographically, is not of volcanic origin. And throughout the Sinai, there is no volcano on the peninsula. So, it is more likely, and also it is accepted in science today, that it is the mountain Al-Badr, where this event in question occurred, where this divine encounter is said to have taken place, where man met his maker and was forever traumatized by it. Many other arguments speak in favor of Mount Sinai being the mountain Hala el-Badr, 150 meters, where the Harat Era mountain range is located. This mountain also has the name Full Moon Crater and is aligned with the moon god Sin. Sin is the moon god who is worshipped in Ur, the hometown of Abraham. Many Bible interpreters, including Dr. Sigmund Freud and Professor Colin Humphreys of Cambridge University, see this as the true mountain of God, because it is the only one mountain that could possibly correspond to the descriptions of the events that took place in the book of Exodus. The information comes from the author with the pseudonym Jens Jurgens, who was born in 1921. His booklet, under the title The Biblical Moses as Powder, Explosive Oil, and Dynamite Manufacturer, caused a sensation. Those in the 6th to 3rd millennium BC in Egypt were immigrant people who created a culture there that today still amazes us. Their buildings, some of which can still be seen, and some of which were built to last for eternity, arouse our admiration of the skills of their builders. In the knowledge and utilization of the natural forces, they had come extraordinarily far, in some things even further than us. Our paint industry today still doesn't have a clue about how to make our colors as beautiful and durable as the Egyptian priestly chemists. The colors used in the burial chambers of a 6,000-year-old pyramid of Ne Vermed still look brand new and vivid. Our physicists today still do not understand the hydraulic law applied by Egyptian architects. Our doctors and chemists don't understand how to properly embalm corpses, as well as the Egyptian priestly chemists. They had much knowledge of natural forces that we do not yet have today. The knowledge of the Egyptian priests was so great that they mastered the art of reading and writing 6,000 years ago, along with the use of electricity, lightning rods, the making and preparation of all kinds of oils, beer, etc., glycerin oil, soap, paper, glass, perfume, cosmetics, and even the manufacturing of gunpowder, and its uses for fireworks purposes as a type of Greek fire, consisting of petroleum, sulfur, and saltpeter. They also had knowledge of medical surgery, and antibiotics were used. But, and wisely so, the Egyptians guarded all their knowledge and kept it strictly secret. They knew that their knowledge was their power. Around 1800 to 400 BC, a horde of Indian nomads broke out and busted into the beautiful and rich lands of Egypt. The Egyptian priest Menathon writes about it. From the east appeared in unexpected ways people of humble origins who bravely come to our country. They broke in and took possession of it by force, without having met with any serious resistance. After the violent ones were captured, they burned our cities and destroyed our divine mansions. And all number of atrocities were committed against the inhabitants. Some were slain, their wives and children were made to be slaves. An ancient Egyptian scripture kept in the British Museum calls these invading Arab pastoral wanderers cow people. In Egyptian history, they are referred to as Hyksos, pastoral people. In Egypt, wall paintings have been found in burial chambers depicting the ancestors of the invaders in magnificent colors. These invaders succeeded at the eastern mouth of the Nile in the land of Goshen to gain a firm footing. They held the drained Egyptians with mercenary armies. 1 Moses 4:7, 1 through 27. As told by Joseph, the Jewish finance minister and Reich chancellor. It is clear that he was in years of hardship due to unheard of common grain usury. By this means, and by bloodshed, the Egyptians were deprived of all their money, their cattle, their land, and their personal freedom. Then, about 200 years later, a new king came to Egypt who no longer knew anything about Joseph, so he didn't give two cares about what his usurious comrades wanted. He ordered and strengthened the Egyptian resistance and took care of things again, like Egyptian military training, to help the people fight against the foreign oppressors. After great economic hardship, bad crop growths, swarms of locusts, insect plagues, droughts, etc., the bitterness of the people against the foreign invaders, who were described as the originators of these plagues, boiled over with intensity. The Egyptian king Ahmoses succeeded Thebes, the founder of the 18th royal dynasty, in 350 BC, in the 4th century BC. The invaders moved east again and were driven back into the Arabian desert, 2 Moses 13:18. That was the first huge historical persecution and expulsion of these invaders. What the Bible tells of the oppression of the Jews in Egypt is a clever falsification of history by Jewish rabbis. The Egyptians are the ones who were oppressed and made into slaves, not the Jews. According to the Jewish historian Josephus and the reports of the Egyptian priests and historian Manetho, Agion 126, the invaders raged so shamefully in the land of Egypt that Pharaoh Amenhotep pursued them to the border of Syria. The Greek historian Diodorus also reports, fragment 34, that the Egyptians, in order to cleanse the land of the leprous, cursed invaders, were forced to literally, physically, throw them over the border to get rid of them. So their leader, the Mesu Moses, in Manetho, Osarsiphus, who was probably a bastard child of the daughter of a king and an Israelite, was one of the Egyptian priests, educated and taught in Pharaoh's court, a full priest, not an apprentice, not an outsider. At that time, the Jews had access to all the best schools, and they knew how to achieve the highest posts in the highest offices. And so Moses became an expert, initiated into the deepest knowledge of the infamous and powerful Egyptian priests, who are probably the most powerful priests to have existed throughout all of our known history, into all their secret wonders, their secret weapons, and chemical machinations, mastering the chemical and physical arts, the magic arts. He even became what would have previously been unheard of and impossible, the son-in-law of the Egyptian high priest Jethro. This fact would subsequently become of the utmost importance for the Jewish people and their way of life. At first, Moses fought for the Egyptians, driving out his fellow tribesmen, and fought a difficult battle within himself. 2 Moses chapter 4. His education and upbringing had made him become an Egyptian outwardly, but by race he was Jewish. Soon, however, the voice of blood and of loyalty to his race won the battle within him. Moses closed and sequestered himself off with his expelled Jewish comrades. He spent a long time thinking about how he could lead his people and how he would be successful at it. Editor's note, that's me, I'm the editor. This is where it starts to get good. Moses had a grand, daring plan in mind. He wanted to make himself the Lord of the Jews, to use them to go and conquer the 12 discordant tribes, which he learned about from the lessons of his teachers, who inhabited the rich and fertile land of Canaan to seize their wealth. He wanted to give his people a highly cultivated, blooming, and fertile land with extravagant mansions already built by someone else's toil and sweat, so they could now enjoy the fertile land flowing with milk and honey. A plan which was in itself a brilliantly profitable one, a bargain to establish dominion and immense riches together. This plan took on a Napoleonic nature, bold, cunning, daring, ruthless, unscrupulous, and of nothing recoiling. But it was difficult to get rid of the argumentative, opinionated nature of the people in order to bring about a strict Jewish state and obedience from the people. A diabolical plan was necessary. He first tried kindness, but according to the Old Testament Bible, his fairness was always met with only murmuring and dissatisfaction, revolutionary and anarchist-minded complaints, and backbiting, hatred. He talked himself tired from morning till night, according to 2 Moses chapter 18, verse 1 through 3. Everything was in vain. Then he received some visits in the desert from his father-in-law Jethro, the Egyptian high priest, who was inaugurated into his secret plans. After extensive consultation together, both Moses and Jethro agreed that on the previous path, it would be impossible for the Mesu Moses character to reach his goal. Moses realized that other means would have to be applied to bend the people into unconditional blind obedience, to bring order and to bring submission, so they could be made into a docile tool in his hand to wreak havoc and destruction upon the Canaanites, to steal their land and wealth. He had learned about such a remedy in Egypt, and his Egyptian father-in-law Jethro, the high priest, had cleared and prepared the path for him with access to the necessary supplies. You see, this is how, to this day, clever priests still fool the stupid, uneducated, ignorant people with bold teachings that they themselves do not believe, to beguile the masses. The priests show to the people terrible gods who bring death and ruin to the people, and they frighten them with hell, death, and the devil, judgment of the dead, and other nonsense which they themselves do not believe. But they present themselves as advocates and representatives of these gods, and the stupid people believe the things that are presented to them by the priests. The greater the dizziness, the more willingly the people believed. The masses were subdued under the mighty hand of the priests. The people worked and toiled for them like bees making honey, and they willingly allowed themselves to be guided by them like oxen. The stupider and more religious the people are, the more glorious and shining is the lifestyle and well-being of the priests. So it was then in Egypt and throughout the world at that moment, and so it is throughout the world to this day. Moses understood the ancient means of domination and exploitation of the nations, so his God had to be a terrible God, a terror to the Jewish people. Moses 23:27, 4 Moses 11:25. He had to be something unprecedented, something terrible, as recorded in 5 Moses 4:34, a god of fire, not the familiar fire of warmth, but a terrible, destroying, ravaging, devouring fire, a mysterious, consuming fire. 2 Moses 24:17, 2 Moses 33:9, 5 Moses 33:22, 23, and 40. This God should speak through the fire, through a strange, shattering fire. 5 Moses 4:33 and 36, 5 Moses 5:24 and 26, etc. He should be able to shatter everything and everyone who does not submit to his orders. 2 Moses 19:12, 22, and 24. The sight of him should fill people with fear, doom, terror, and horror, and yet he should be invisible. 2 Moses 33:20. In order to do this and get the full effect, this God had to be a zealous God. Everyone had to become fanatical and religiously intolerant. Opponents of those who think differently or those who believe differently should be shattered, destroyed, and killed. He had to use fire to murder, exterminate, and kill all heretics in a rage. 5 Moses 32, verse 4 and 5. One God, one faith. A God who was all about witch-burning, inquisitions, and intolerance had to be the God of Moses. And this is the only way he could use this God for his purposes. You read in 5 Moses chapter 13 and chapter 28 how horrible, terrible, bloodthirsty, fanatical, loveless, and devilish that God, Yahweh, that Mesu intended to present to the ignorant Bedouin people was. One shudders at such a thing, this great abyss of wickedness, inhumanity, and reprobation. Yet Moses had planned carefully, and the high priest Jethro had approved of his plan. This plan could not have been smarter, more cunning, or more practical. In the horrifying rocky wilderness on Mount Sinai, far from other peoples, in the solitude of the desert, that's where the plan was to be carried out. That's where the dress rehearsal takes place, and that's where the great fraud was to go down. A fraud so great that it's been going on and has influenced the spirit of humanity for millennia. Countless people have been held under the spell of this nameless misfortune for a long time. It's a spectacle that makes you laugh, but also makes you cry, which Moses performed with his accomplices at Sinai. The terribleness and fire of the God Yahweh was supposed to be shown to the stupid people on Mount Sinai in all its might. In order to represent the terrible God Yahweh, who was supposed to be a consuming fire, he used gunpowder and dynamite, which he ordered from the Egyptian priests to have it prepared in advance. The respected scholar Darwin already said that this was his suspicion as well. An enclosure was made all around the entire Mount Sinai. No one, neither human nor animal, was allowed to cross this fence. No one was allowed to enter the mountain on pain of death. It was recorded that if anyone touched the fence, he would be shot with a bullet, according to 3 Moses 19:12 and 13 through 21, and 2 Moses 34, verse 3. The theater actors Moses and Aaron had to be left undisturbed on top of the mountain. It took them 2 days to get the necessary preparations for the spectacle on the mountain to be ready. They laid gunpowder and dynamite mines and made installations for fireworks in the manner of the Egyptian priests. The Egyptian priest, the Meso-Moses character, surpassed his teachers in cunning and wickedness. On the 3rd day, Moses announced to the people Yahweh should come down and appear to the people in a thick cloud. 2 Moses 19, verse 9 through 11. To show their appreciation, the people should take off their clothes and wash them, and no man should lay with his wife. 2 Moses 19:10, and other mumbo-jumbo. On the morning of the 3rd day, there arose on the mountain terrible thunder and lightning. The accomplices of Moses arose on the mountain to let off a number of powder and dynamite mines. A dense cloud of smoke enveloped the peak of the mountain. It was glorious. The God Yahweh had descended upon the mountain. The people heard the sound of a strong trumpet, which was Aaron, who gave up that signal to the accomplices on the mountain for the next set of explosions on cue for the great stage production. Tremendous terror filled the people when the roar of the explosions shook the air, shook the earth, and caused the whole mountain to shake, as reported in 2 Moses 19:18 and Psalm 68, verse 9. Moses now quickly led the stupid, reluctant people from the camp to the mountain to meet their fire god. 2 Moses 19:17. Fire went up from the mountain, and the mountain was destroyed. Powder and smoke enveloped and trembled the mountain from the huge explosions. Above, Aaron blew the trumpet harder with all his lung power. It was the trumpet sounds that signaled when a new powder mine should explode. Moses spoke with his fire god Yahweh, and he answered his faithful servant and mediator Moses quickly and punctually with terrible concussive explosions. 2 Moses 19, verse 18-19. Fear and horror filled the ignorant Bedouin people. Then suddenly the explosion stopped. A signal called him, the theater director Moses, upstairs. Moses goes up, installs the mines again, comes back down, and warns repeatedly about entering the mountain. Only he and Aaron are allowed up there. And if anyone else besides he and Aaron even try to go up there, the Lord would destroy them. Ibid, verses 20 through 25. The explosions continued now. Thunder and lightning increased, the mountain smote, and the trumpet sounded from the clouds. The people fled in horror and begged Moses humbly, "Moses, please, you should talk to God for us, or we will die. We just want to obey him in everything he tells you." 2 Moses 20, verse 18 through 21. So, the purpose of this dangerous theater performance was achieved. Horror upon horror had seized the people. Robbed of their will and energy, they were paralyzed by fear into total obedience. No more questions needed to be asked. Just like how Columbus and his soldiers looked like gods to the Indians when they fired their cannons and rifles, the Jews now recognized Moses as a kind of demigod to the terrible fire god Yahweh. They humbly acknowledged the immense power of their national god, and they thenceforward believed everything Moses showed them, and like sheep, they did everything he demanded. Aaron, Nadab, Abihu, and the 70 elders climbed the mountain of God. Moses and his servant Joshua went a little further to the top of the mountain to get there to start the necessary devices for the fireworks, igniting them with sulfur threads, and then quickly returned to the elders. 2 Moses 24, verse 1 through 3 and 18. The fireworks went off, and the elders could see with their own eyes, they ignited, and the elders could see with their own eyes that their God was a consuming fire. Ibid, verses 17. And they testified to this before the ignorant Bedouin people. Lighting the fireworks up on top of the mountain wasn't always a harmless con job. The chief fireman Moses got his face blown off many times over, to where the people were afraid to approach him because his face was so disfigured. That's why they began the practice of preparing Moses by putting a blanket over his face first, before they would let him talk to the people, because it was too horrific and off-putting to see him act as if it were somehow normal to have half your face blown off. I guess the dumb people just subconsciously assumed that's what happened to him when he talks to God, who is a shattering and consuming fire. Now we can begin to understand how such a strong love and loyalty could be instilled into the hearts of the people for the messy Moses character, since they assumed that he suffered such injuries on their behalf by interceding for them, and they were grateful for it. This is how Moses became the Jewish Pope. Now that the people had seen and experienced the terrible God Yahweh, who brought death and destruction, and after they vowed their believing humility and their unquestioning obedience to Yahweh's deputy on earth, then Moses could raise his head more boldly. He wrote poetry to his fire god and gave Yahweh all the characteristics that Moses wanted him to have in order to serve his own plans and purposes. He gave Yahweh all the words, laws, and rules from his mouth that he wanted to put in place over the desert wanderers which they still follow without question to this day. At this point, the confidence of the messy Moses was heightened and solidified concretely. And the stupid people, in their fear and willful spiritual ignorance, believed every word and commandment given by their daring leader, who had to use his holy fire to intimidate them into compliance and to put an end, once and for all, to the constant complaining, murmuring, and backbiting of the desert wanderers. 2 Moses 32, verses 20 through 24. Now, Moses said to himself, now they'll really bow down. He was also able to do this through his accomplices, the children of Levi, who in one day helped Moses kill 3,000 of the smartest of his own people, who did not believe or did not obey him properly. 2 Moses 32, 24 through 30. He threatened that anyone who did something different or taught something different from what he taught, with terrible, horrible punishments, including death for anyone who tried to make peace between people who held conflicting or differing opinions or beliefs. Parents had to murder their children, children strangling their parents, men strangling their wives or their best friends, ruthlessly if they dared to doubt or believed or heard any other teachings. 4 of Moses, chapter 13, just like certain popes did. The Jewish Pope Moses commanded an oath from the enslaved people that there would be nothing else believed but what he taught. This is how he forced all kinds of hocus pocus, sprinkling with blood, etc., over the people. And this is how the unscrupulous man became established and strengthened in his great power as the leader and sole master of the masses. Now, to ensure the continued strength of his position, Moses prepared the solution without difficulties. He simply combined the explosives manufacturing room, the laboratory, with the dwelling place of the invisible God Yahweh, which no one was allowed to enter except Moses and his chosen accomplices, according to 2 Moses 33, 7 through 11, 4 Moses 3, verse 10, and called it the tabernacle. Now, the tabernacle was therefore a laboratory for the production of powder, explosive oil, and dynamite on a large scale. For reasons of secrecy and danger, it was kept away from the camp, 2 Moses 33, 7, and it was under constant guarded supervision, 2 Moses 33, 11. Access to the tabernacle was forbidden to the people and was even punishable by death, according to 5 Moses 3:10. So, since the tabernacle had to be built in consideration of its dual purpose, then it needed to be very large and very expensive building, costing hundreds of thousands of shekels, 2 Moses 38. The tabernacle swarmed with all kinds of necessary equipment for producing explosives. It contained countless ash pots, shovels, basins, and hundreds of braziers, all made of brass. 2 Moses 38:3 and 11, Moses 27:3, Moses 16:13. As is well known, the tabernacle consisted of 3 parts. The forecourt, into which you can finally eventually let the stupid people in, which is separate from the holy sanctuary, which is the gunpowder and dynamite workshop, where only the priests were allowed to enter. And you had the Holy of Holies, to which only Moses had access. The Holy of Holies with Moses' gunpowder chest. The Ark of the Covenant was kept in there. Right in front of the Holy of Holies stood the large altar for burnt offerings. It had 4 horns. Those horns were mortars from which to hurl stones by means of the gunpowder that Moses had knowledge of. 2 Moses 23:28, 5 Moses 7:20, 5 Moses 8:15, 5 Moses 21:6, Joshua 10:11, Joshua 24:1 through 2. They were also used in defense of the Holy of Holies, aka the gunpowder and dynamite supplies. Sometimes the stupid people would get to see a display of the fire of the Lord, when a priest would induce the Greek fire by sprinkling some powder or oil to give a slow-burning, bright fire on the altar. 3 Moses 9:23 through 24, 3 Moses 10, verse 1 through 2, and the foolish people rejoiced as fire from the Lord came and consumed the burnt offerings and fat on the altar. Now, this is an editor's note. What did you think was in the Ark of the Covenant? 2 tablets, some bread, and a stick? And they had to carry that around everywhere? Give me a break. But how did Moses make gunpowder? Well, the solution to this puzzle can be found by looking at the Bible. According to 2 Moses 29:36, it was decreed that it should be observed daily in the tabernacle that 1 ox and 2 lambs should be sacrificed for the reconciliation of the people as a type of death penalty. The gullible Israelites were commanded to destroy all their livestock, and that they who wanted to slaughter an animal, he must bring it to the priests, the slaughterer. Only the priests were allowed to slaughter animals, and the animals had to be slaughtered at the tabernacle for the glory of God. Throwing away the blood, eating the blood, or wasting the blood was death penalty, prohibited. All the blood had to be brought to Moses, who would confiscate it for his holy purposes. 3 Moses 17:3 and 16. The tabernacle must have been swimming in blood. The fire god Yahweh of Moses was a terribly bloodthirsty God. It is with horror that one must turn away from this God of Moses. It is not a God of love and mercy who wants to swim around in a sea of blood every day. But that is the kind of God that Moses needed to perpetrate his frauds in order to control the people, to stack those shekels from here to infinity. So here comes the $1,000,000 question. For what reason and for what possible purpose did Moses now need such enormous amounts of blood every day? They already told you it's a death penalty if you throw it away, so he had to do something with it. Many of you, mostly the men, may already know that if you mix blood and ash with animal products, the pile will soon turn white like a salt, potassium nitrate, KNO3, as occurs naturally and found in cattle stables and shows up in deserts. Potassium saltpeter, but mixed with coal and sulfur, makes gunpowder. Also, all of the fat obtained from all the slaughtered animals became tallow and had to be brought to the priestly dynamite manufacturers. 2 Moses 29:22, 3 Moses 1:8, 3 Moses 3:3 through 5, 9 through 11, 15 through 17, 3 Moses 4:8 through 9, 31 and 35, 3 Moses 7:30 through 31, 3 Moses 9, verse 10, 19, and 20, 3 Moses 17, verse 6. The people were forbidden, under penalty of death, from eating the fat or using it at all times. 3 Moses 7:20 through 25. What did the fire god Yahweh do with all of this confiscated fat? Truckloads of grease and oil? What were they for? Why was it necessary for the people to bring it to the priest as a gift or tax, supposedly for sacrifice? In reality, the chemist and apothecary Moses prepared glycerin oil from it, C3H5CH3. As is well known, you get a watercolored, colorless, sweetish oil in the saponification of oils and fats. The same is very healing. It is already known that Moses had learned how to make these oils from the Egyptian priests, apothecaries. For the saponification of oils and fats, all you need is glycerin, oil, and ash. Hence all the many ash pots and water barrels in the tabernacle. The use of all the soaps, by the way, would be beneficial to the priests who were always stained with blood. The Bible explicitly states that Moses produced a healing oil on behalf of his God, according to the arts of the Egyptian apothecary priests. 3 Moses 30, verses 24 and 25, and 2 Moses 37, verse 29. Of course, Moses declared the oil to be pure and holy, just like everything that the ordinary people aren't allowed to know about. 2 Moses 30, 25, 31, and 32. Its production was forbidden to the people and was punishable by death. Anyone who made glycerin oil should be exterminated. 2 Moses 30, 32, 33, 37, 38. So why did the bloodthirsty and fat-consuming God of Moses forbid the people from the production of the healing oil that the people needed so badly? Moses used it for healing purposes. The priests were allowed to use it if you paid them properly. 3 Moses 14:13. But he mainly used it to make one terrible explosive device: explosive water. 5 Moses 19:21, which is explosive oil or nitroglycerin, C3H5OH3. This is obtained when glycerin oil is mixed with sulfuric acid or with nitric acid, which Moses had both. So this explosive oil is one of the things that was produced in his laboratory. By mixing the explosive oil, he made the sprinkling water, as the Bible calls it. With coal, he got dynamite, whose terrible explosive properties are known to everyone. Through a shock blow or through heating, if you just let the sun hit it, the scary explosive oil ignites like dynamite. Naturally, the production of these explosives and explosive materials created a very real danger to life. In 3 Moses 10, verses 1 through 7, the scriptures tell of the sons of chief fireman Aaron, Nadab, and Abihu, who were killed in a terrible explosion. They tried in the tabernacle the making of a new foreign fire, a new explosive device, which the Lord had not commanded them, meaning that Moses didn't know how to make it yet. The mass exploded and burnt them both. That is the horror of the dynamite manufacturers. The father Aaron had to remain silent, despite his great pain, not to reveal the secret of how they had died, and the horribly mutilated corpses were hidden from the sight of the people and carried away from the camp. The people were led to believe that the fire had come from the Lord. 3 Moses 10:6. Of course, the stupid people, dizzy with submission, believed it. From then on, the gunpowder company's accomplices were not allowed intoxicating drinks in the tabernacle of the dynamite manufacturer. 3 Moses 10:9. So they will not die. You can see how dangerous and life-threatening it was to spend time at the tabernacle, especially if you were taking wine or strong drinks. Moses also commanded Aaron that he should not be at all times in the front of the inner sanctuary that goes behind the curtain or by the mercy seat that is on the ark, that he might not die. 3 Moses 16:2. The risk of explosion was too great, especially in hot weather. Every stranger was forbidden entry. Capital punishment was allowed. Only Moses' confidants, Aaron and his sons, were allowed in the Holy of Holies place. 5 Moses 3, verse 10. As a result, only Aaron's son Eleazar was left to make the glycerin oil, explosive oil, and gunpowder. According to 4 Moses 4, verse 16, the tabernacle was always closely guarded around the clock to protect the secrets therein. So, of course the people never saw anything. Since they were never allowed in there, then of course they didn't know anything about it. That was an editor's note. The great and dizzying power of Moses was founded on the knowledge of the production of powder, explosive oil, and dynamite. These explosives were his God Yahweh, whom he gave to the stupid people who were immersed in a cheerful spectacle of what they imagined to be thunder and lightning. He took the old laws from Assyria and Egypt and let them appear as Yahweh's laws, as the laws of the God of Moses, but there was nothing new about them. That's what he did, just as clever priests have always done, in this manner, for as long as there have been people. And through his terrible, blood-dripping death and destruction, he conquered the biggest threat to tremendous power by gaining total obedience from the people. When Moses walked through the camp, the people got up and threw themselves down on the ground with their faces and foreheads on the ground, and they remained in that position until he had passed and gone into his laboratory, the tabernacle. A huge scam and a theater performance to make you laugh your ass off. You can hardly take the dizziness any higher. But the scam was incredibly profitable. Moses was a very experienced businessman. As a forethought, all the Jews, or all the laws his God Yahweh pronounced were designed to give him and his accomplices enormous rewards, throwing riches into their laps. To build his tabernacle, all the people of the congregation had to give him gold, silver, precious stones, bring ores, valuable cloths, etc. That's according to 2 Moses 25:30 and 2 Moses 35. Gathered for the tabernacle amounted to millions in value, of which Moses and his helpers alone took several million, according to 2 Moses 38, plus expensive clothes. 2 Moses 39. Also, he introduced a poll tax for everyone over the age of 20. All who paid this poll tax were to be spared from the plagues. 2 Moses 30, 12 through 16. Also, the first fruits, that is, all of the first fruits to become ripe, had to be brought to the Lord, meaning his papal representative, the gourmet Moses, according to 2 Moses 34:36. Moses, as the original textbook Jewish finance minister, was a master at inventing new taxes. Under all sorts of bogus excuses, he was unsurpassable. If you wanted to take a religious vow, for example, it was required for large sums of money to be paid. 3 Moses 27:3. The insatiable Moses continued and required the people to give a ransom for their firstborn. In this way alone, he, Aaron, and his sons received 1,365 shekels per year, according to 5 Moses 3:45 through 51. All offenses committed by the people were punished by the priests, a priestly judge, with indulgences. Even serious moral lapses could occur, just as in the medieval papal church, could be solved with money. 4 Moses chapter 18. All betrothed people had to make a sacrifice by paying special fees to the priests, of course. 5 Moses chapter 6. It was raining gold and silver bowls at the dedication of the tabernacle for Moses, and a quantity of cattle. 5 Moses chapter 7. All lifting, sin, and grain offerings belonged to Moses. The children of Levi got tithes from all the people. 5 Moses chapter 18. When Moses led the Jews to attack and rob the Midianites, his God Yahweh, his deputy Moses, received all his share of the looted money, livestock, and unsleeping virgins, according to 5 Moses 31:27. What did the fire god do with this large number of unsleeping virgins from the tribe of the Midianites? In any case, his deputy, the millionaire Moses, received a cheap, richly furnished harem, and this fraudulent, cruel, and lustful harem owner and usurer, the Mesu Moses, is praised and called a mediator between God and man. Is that not blasphemy? Moses got 32 virgins, the Levites got 320, and the other cronies got 15,680 virgins. This is the socialization of women and Jewish female trafficking from 3,000 years ago. You can see that the fraud of the arch crook Moses was up to was a highly profitable business. There was an indulgence of this fraud and only a glimmer against it. His fire god Yahweh made his fraudster quickly become a millionaire. He stood at the peak of his power, rich and powerful, the absolute ruler of his people who begged for his mercy while whining and crawling around in the dust at his feet. When people are dumb and trusting, you can just load them up with a bunch of nonsense. The greater the nonsense, the greater the faith. Moses could smile and sit back and say to himself, the fairy tales about my fire god Yahweh have already brought in a lot of money for me. But he held the purse strings a little too tightly, and the exploitation and proliferation of the people was a little too strong. 250 of the most distinguished in the community, counselors and honest people, as the Bible aptly describes them, in 5 Moses 16:2, rebelled against the oppressors. They came forward and said to Moses and Aaron, Ibid 3, you do it too much. The oppression is too bad. Stealing from the people. The tax pressure is too strong. because the church, the whole congregation, are holy, not just the priests. Why do you exalt yourselves above the church of the Lord? Like Jesus, they threw indignation at the priestly crooks for their pride, greed, exploitation, domineering, and deceit. Like the high priests such as Savonarola, Huss, and Jerome did 2,500 years later to the popes, now Moses appeared to faint from terror, Ibid 4. He realized that he would be lost unless a solution was quickly found to rescue him. So, time gained, everything gained. A quick, prudent decision was made. He called the rebels, heretics, and modernists next tomorrow before the tabernacle. The Lord should decide who should be priest. Should it be Moses or his followers? Now it was a matter to act decisively and ruthlessly, quickly. The heretics had to be exterminated with fire and sword. The indignation had to be fought down in cold blood, even if streams of blood had to flow. When the 250 rebels were at the door the next day, at the tabernacle, with its censer and waiting for the things that were to come, Moses cleverly went to the huts of the rebels. Then he approached the tabernacle and gave a speech. He said, "If no harm comes to these rebels, then the Lord has not sent me. But if the earth opens up, devours these rebels, their houses and their families, then you will know that they have blasphemed the Lord, and I really am the representative of the Lord God Yahweh," according to 4 Moses 16:28. There was a short, anxious silence, then a terrible crack and crashing. The earth shook, roared, and tore open, scattering the crowd. 5 Moses 16:32. The powder and dynamite mines that the unscrupulous Bill and Moses had in the quiet of night set up with the help of his accomplices, he then set fire to them with silver threads right before his speech, had their terrible effect. Shaken with horror, the people fled. The 250 honest ones in front of the tabernacle heard the explosion in the distance and saw their huts blowing up. Before they could recover from the paralyzing horror, the fire came out from the Lord. 4 Moses 16:35. The unscrupulous Moses had also set powder and dynamite mines under the ground where they were now standing. The 250 were blown to smithereens. All prey to death. Moses had triumphed. All of his opponents, all of them insurgents, heretics, modernists, and enlighteners, were right there eliminated in one fell swoop. The danger was averted. The smartest of the people, who are always a danger to the priesthood, were lying dead on the ground. Nothing was going to come between Moses and his money. LOL, that was an editor's note. But the people were hot. They wanted to do in Moses and Aaron, who fled to the tabernacle of the congregation. And then the Lord suddenly appeared. Moses and Aaron, the two dynamite heroes, get to the powder room, grab their mortars, the horns of the altar, and shot out the terrible fire of the Lord onto the people. 4 Moses 16:41-50. 14,700 people found death. Naturally, the people were led to believe that the Lord sent the rampage, the plague of fire. Finally, when enough blood was shed, Aaron ran with the incense censer around the people, among the people, so the plague may cease. And, of course, the shooting stopped. Otherwise, the main fraudster himself would get shot. The great heretic court of the dehumanized Moses had done its duty. The people were trampled to the ground. The papal beast, in human form, won. He looked triumphantly at the terrible field of corpses in front of him and just brushed off his hands. The tabernacle smoked and steamed with the blood of the slain and echoed with the cries of the mutilated. The messy Moses was left unmarred, his purposes again achieved. The flower of the people destroyed, their backbone broken. His priestly state, his priestly kingdom was firmly established. He and his helpers, the priestly class, had become millionaires and were grateful. Because of the stupidity of the people, they lived a carefree, comfortable existence with a brilliant and increased annual income under their leader. His giddy idea of the fire god Yahweh had borne wonderful fruit. Moses had made great use of the secret he stole from the Egyptians of powder and dynamite preparations for his business purposes. The fact that Moses knew of the secret of gunpowder, dynamite, and explosive oil is clearly stated in the Bible and other places. When he and the Hyksos passed through at low tide through the Reed Sea, which is a bay of the Red Sea, when the Egyptian army pursuing him came near, he looked up to the Lord from the pillar of fire and cloud and made a tear of fire on the Egyptian army, pushed the wheels off their chariots and overthrew them. 2 Moses 14:24. In other words, Mesu and his accomplices used powder and dynamite to throw the Egyptian army into confusion and chaos. The returning tides did them in. He later in the desert blew up rocks with powder or dynamite to obtain fountains of water. 2 Moses 17:16. His holy fire destroyed the golden calf. 2 Moses 32:7. When the people once more murmured against his tyranny and exposed his outrageous tax policy, he kindled the fire of the Lord among them. 4 Moses 1, verse 1 through 4. He set powder and dynamite mines under the huts of the smartest people, and once again, the Lord sent fiery serpents among the people. He fired with his mortars, horns of the altar, field snakes among them, and brought powder and dynamite mines for ignition. The stupid people were made to worship the cannons, the horns, and put their faith in their terrible power. When the Bedouins of Mesu invaded the land of the Amorites, the Lord sent a great hail of stones upon the Amorites. More fell by the hail than by the sword, according to Joshua 10, verse 11. So the frightened Amorites were invaded by a hail of stones from the mortars of Moses. Similar reports are written in Joshua 11, verse 6 through 9, and Joshua 24:12. The hornets of God, as mentioned in the Bible, are the stones from mortars. The walls of the ancient Gothic city fortress of Jericho were brought down by powder and dynamite mines. While the mines were being laid, the people moved in one 7-day procession around the city, Joshua 6:3. Of course, the mumbo-jumbo was not to be missed. As the Bible makes clear and unambiguous, there have always been individuals who have been inaugurated into the secret of powder and explosive oil preparation. Samuel knew of the application of the explosives. 1 Samuel 7, verse 10. Solomon's priests practiced the magic arts. Moses cheated and used the fire of the Lord, as the Bible calls it. In this case, explosive oil or a kind of Greek fire. In his fight against the priests of Baal. Read the interesting presentation in 1 Kings 18, verse 30 through 40. When the Jewish priests went into captivity, the secret of the powder and dynamite preparation was lost, as 2 Maccabees 1:18 tells us very clearly. Probably whoever held the secrets died before he was able to pass them on. Anyone who still can't believe that Moses was really a powder, dynamite, and explosive oil manufacturer can look to 2 Maccabees 1:18 through 36 to completely clear it up. It was very unreasonable for the Jewish religion makers to leave that passage standing. So history tells us literally when in 518 the Jews, the actual Jews, not the subjugated natives, were taken away to Babel, the priests quickly responded at the command of the prophet Jeremiah, 2 Maccabees 2, the holy fire was hidden into a deep, dark, dry pit so that no one would know about it. Moses is praised as a great man. He is mistakenly regarded as a great legislator. He wasn't. The Ten Commandments are a miserable excerpt that existed among the nations and were in use in the Near East and India long before Moses. Similar ones are found in ancient Babylon over 700 years ago. We already saw the Ten Commandments in the Babylonian laws of Hammurabi. Every pastor knows that the 5 books of Moses weren't written by Moses, but they were compiled by Jewish rabbis from the sacred writings of the Near Eastern people years after Moses. The Book of Psalms came partly from the Egyptians and partly from the indigenous subjugated population in Canaan, whose writings and names, Israelites, the Jews falsely claim are theirs. So, Moses was not a great lawgiver, not a great historian, not a writer, not the creator of the first monotheistic religion. Moses gave the people a fetish, created an idol of fire to worship. Of course, he had to describe it as invisible so that his trade secret was protected. This thesis of Jens Jurgens has stood for over 100 years in the room, and after extensive research, no physicist, chemist, or theologian has commented on these expressed views to say if they represent reality or not. The followers of the Abrahamic faith should be ashamed to worship the fraudster, abuser, and murderer Moses. Jürgen Raff. So it's a heavy one, guys, but it explains a lot, and it gives us a lot of answers to questions that we had and should have had about the foundations of our modern day religions and what we believe in. So stay mentally strong. We shouldn't have to believe in anything. We should just know something is true based on the facts. Stay strong. Take care.